finally, you remember during the Biden administration, there was a crucial moment in which Pentagon interfered. That was the moment that Starmer went to Washington meeting with Joe Biden, asking to let these long-range missiles to be sent to Ukraine. Pentagon said no, there is no way to go in that direction. That would be hugely problematic and escalatory if we do that. Finally, after sending all these weapons to the Middle East, to the West Asia, we have heard from the Pentagon. And they're somehow saying that they warned Trump of extended war plans, against Iran, because the war can backfire. This war can drag on. And here is what was reported on Fox News considering Pentagon.
Donald Trump's top general is highlighting the potential risks with striking Iran. Now, Joint Chiefs Chairman General Dan Caine has warned it could lead to the possibility of a prolonged conflict in the region. It comes after the president said last week that if no deal is reached over Iran's nuclear program within the next 10 days, he could take military action. Now, according to that Axios report, they wrote, quote, while Caine was all in on the Venezuela operation, he has been more cautious in the discussions around Iran, two sources said. While Caine sees the stakes of a major operation in Iran as higher, with a greater risk for entanglement and American casualties. President Trump hit back on Truth Social, writing, quote, the story does not attribute this vast wealth of knowledge to anyone and is 100% incorrect. General Caine, like all of us, would like not to see war, but if a decision is made on ongoing against Iran at a military level, it is his opinion that it will be something easily won. President Trump went on to say he'd prefer to make a deal, but if they don't, it will be a very bad day for Iran.
Yeah. What is your assessment of what's going on, Larry? Do you think that the military part of the government, Pentagon, is somehow getting somewhere to make Donald Trump himself understand what would happen if Donald Trump decides to attack Iran?
It should. Let me preface my remarks with that. It should. The Pentagon should be urging caution, and for some different reasons that we can go into if you want to, but I don't think it is. I think this is a story ginned up by the crowd around Trump. Don't know if Caine was complicit in it or not. I doubt it. But I think it's a story that continues to make what Trump wants to do with regard to diplomacy even more problematic. And by that, I mean, I think Trump likes that problematic nature of his diplomacy because he feels like it gives him an advantage and it puts his opponent at a disadvantage. So he's got all manner of people out there conjecturing in one way or the other in order to make it even a more impossible task for Iran to make any kind of intelligence assessment as to whether or not an attack is coming. And if you've noticed some of his other remarks about maybe I'll just sneak up on them and tap them a little bit. And then if they come back to negotiations and are compliant, I'll tap them no more. But if they don't, I'll really tap them and that sort of thing. I think he thinks that that is a part, and some of the people around him agree, of his negotiating tactic. And so we're going to get all manner of information until it happens or it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And Fox is a conduit for a lot of this to and fro, of course.
Yeah. But do we know that what is the understanding on the part of the whole administration? You think that J.D. Vance and Tulsi Gabbard would be in that, would agree with Donald Trump with the attack on Iran? These two people were somehow more sane than the other, characters.
That's hard to say in the Trump administration. Sanity to a degree. I think Vance and Gabbard are the two people in the administration who, of all the rest of the yahoos, would be most apt to counsel caution. And maybe even in the case of Vance, to counsel some of the things I was revealing this morning, for example, on another podcast. To wit, we have somewhere around 35 to 40%, depending on who you listen to and what you count, arrayed of our military might, arrayed around or in the proximity of Iran right now. That means that, one, we are neglecting combatant commander strategies all over the globe. That means that they cannot carry out their combatant command missions of presence, especially important with regard to allies like Japan. They cannot carry out their freedom of navigation missions, fairly important, because regardless of what people in the world think about freedom of navigation, it is, in fact, the United States Navy that assures freedom of navigation, sometimes to its own interest, to be true, but all the time it ensures freedom of navigation. I'll give you an example. When we conducted an exercise recently in China, and we did some things to passage points like the Straits of Malacca, like the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, like the Bab el-Mandeb in the Red Sea, guess who? And this was an eclectic team. The whole world virtually was represented, major powers and economic interests on this group. Guess who was asked to come first by everyone, including China? The United States Navy, because we have a reputation, deservedly, I think, most of the time, for protecting travel on the high seas. Now, Trump has put this in major jeopardy with his strikes in international waters against so-called drug dealers and such, and he's put it in jeopardy for other reasons too. But nonetheless, we are the assurer of freedom of the seas. We can't do that in many very important areas right now. Were it to be a problem, we would really have a significant issue. And then lastly, we are really hurting in terms of people. And I know Hegseth has been lying about that periodically, particularly with regard to the Army, primarily because he's taken something like 11% of middle category 4 people into the Army, which are not good soldiers. They're not people that you'd want to muster for combat for sure. Think McNamara's 100,000, for example, in Vietnam. So there are all kinds of problems with this, besides the fact we're spending the taxpayers' money to the billions and billions of dollars with all this military arrayed around and in the vicinity of Iran. And every day it's more and more and more, which doesn't seem to concern Trump, but I'm sure it probably concerns the Pentagon, and it probably concerns the Congress, those few who do think of the budget from time to time. So all of these things are impacting what is going on here, and all of these things will impact what Trump's decision is more and more the longer he delays. And you've got things like moon and light and weather in general and other parameters for the attack being ideal or not so ideal. We had real problems with this, for example, with George W. Bush in 2003, because people were saying, some people in the administration were saying, well, maybe we shouldn't do this right now. And the military came back and said, well, we've got to do it because the heat. We can't delay it any longer. We've got to do it. We've got to do it now or not do it at all for at least a long period of time until the heat subsides again, at least somewhat. So there are all manner of things that are going on right now that might impact a decision one way or the other, not least of which is the mercurial nature of Donald Trump, who, I return to my original point that I've been making everywhere that I can, Donald Trump does not want a war. He's caught between Bibi Netanyahu on the one hand and Miriam Adelson and others like her on the other. The Jewish lobby, very powerful, very moneyed, and absolutely essential for his reelection and essential for the Republicans holding the 2 houses of Congress in the midterms on one side, and he's got Bibi Netanyahu on the other, whose arch opponent, if you will, potentially, Naftali Bennett, has declared Turkey the next enemy after Iran, letting the cat out of the bag as to the greater Israel business, which I'm sure really excited Doha, Abu Dhabi, Riyadh, and elsewhere in the Arab world. So we've got all these factors playing on this, in addition to this is really fraught with potential for disaster. Let me give you one example. Yesterday, I saw a map displaying where each of our ships was at that particular time. 3 of them were in the Gulf itself. 3 naval combatants were in the Gulf itself. Now, that's an accurate map, and it came from New York Times or someone like that. That's an accurate map, and I suspect it probably is. Those ships are dead. They're dead. No sailor in the United States Navy, when I was a member of the Pacific Command, the largest command in the repertoire of the United States, the force provider for Central Command, a little pipsqueak command at that time, we would never have conscience putting a carrier in the Gulf. We've done that since then. And most of the time, we wouldn't put a warship there. The water is too shallow. The turn radius is too great. The seas are too narrow. The strait is constricted. You die if you go into the Persian Gulf, and you're up against any kind of enemy that knows what it's doing. And I beg your pardon, Iran now knows what it's doing big time. So each one of those ships is gone if it starts. Who wants to see, especially if you're a president, front page, above the fold, right side of the New York Times, USS sunk with all hands on board in Persian Gulf or wherever? This whole thing is fraught with problems, Nima. And all of those problems in one way or another are probably reaching Trump, either through Caine, through the military, not reaching him through these asinine generals on the outside who are claiming that everything will be copacetic and wonderful and everything, and who probably have heavy investments, money investments in this being the case. But through real advice, Vance, Gabbard, perhaps others, he's getting these different forms of counsel. And I think he's thinking twice and thrice about what he's contemplating.
Larry, the U.S. aircraft carrier Gerald Ford is close to Israel, but is dealing with a problem, with a huge problem with the sewage, with the toilets. It's not just with the toilets, but the problem in terms of disease that they can cause, these sort of problems in that. And do you think that Donald Trump would use it to defend Israel, or he's gonna, if he attacks, he's gonna use it to attack? What is the purpose of Gerald Ford?
Let me tell you another problem it has, Nima, that the Navy's never going to admit to, nor the president, if he even knows. They don't have enough sailors. They do not have enough sailors. The Navy has been so short on its recruiting, its reserve component, which is necessary to things like we're contemplating here, is 40% short. 40%. That's almost 1 in 2 positions not filled. It's heavily short in hospitals, doctors, nurses, and other things. And that's the Navy. That's the Navy's essential medical complement. You have got sailors on the Ford, and you've got sailors on other ships that have been on there for 9 months or longer. You're hot bunking ships, actually. You're taking one ship and bringing it into Norfolk, for example, and you're taking the crew off for 2 weeks. They've been on it for 9 months. And you're basically putting them back on another ship to go on another deployment with very little shore time with their families or anyone else. The sailors are getting worn out, and they're getting tired of this kind of routine. So you've got problems like that on these ships too. They're not going to be publicized so far as they can stop them from being publicized, but you've got these problems. When Trump, for example, talks about going to 330 ships in the U.S. Navy, it's a joke. It's a joke even in the Navy, because they know they couldn't man those ships. They'd be in dry dock. They'd sit in port because they couldn't sail. Or they'd do like they're doing now. They'd rotate these crews. And they'd sail the ship, rotate the crew, and sail the ship and rotate the crew, and the crew would get out after 3 years. Or, it's terrible on morale. So that's another aspect of Venezuela and now Iran. You've put these people at sea, and you've put them at sea a long time, and you've got morale going down. Regardless of how many admirals come out, like the one the other day, the 3-star the other day, oh, we can do Iran in a day. We can finish Iran off. These people are crazy. They're nuts. They're not going to do it in a day. They're not going to do it in 3 days. If they come in with all guns firing, as it were, if they come in dramatically and instantaneously and almost what Colin Powell would have said, in an attempt to create the decisiveness in the first moments of battle, then maybe they might survive fairly well. I mean that. They might survive fairly well. They're not going to accomplish their objectives, and they're going to kill a lot of people, but they might survive fairly well. If they come in piecemeal, they're going to come in like almost any military coming in piecemeal, and they're going to get what any military coming in piecemeal normally gets. They're going to get heavily attrited a little bit at a time. And then you say, woo, I got to go bigger. Ooh, well, I got to go bigger. Kind of like we did in Vietnam, a little bit here. Oh, that didn't work. A little bit here. Not working yet. A little bit more. Now we'll see. And then you come in with everything you've got. We never did that in Vietnam. And had we done that in Vietnam, other than nuclear weapons, I'm not sure it would have changed anything. So you see what I'm talking about here with regard to just basic Clausewitzian principles about the use of military force, about which Trump knows nothing, absolutely zero. His head is vacant when it comes to military strategy and military operations and military tactics. All he knows is, oh, we killed that guy. Oh, good, you got him. With regard to Qassam, the Iranian head of the IRGC.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
General Soleimani.
Yeah, Soleimani. Qassam Soleimani, wasn't it? Yeah. And was it al-Baghdadi out there in Syria? That's what he knows. Oh, a strike, we kill somebody. That's good. That's really good. I don't think he knows squat about real military operations. And frankly, we haven't had a real military operation, the kind Iran will occasion if we're smart, since, roughly Korea. Maybe the first Gulf War, but I wouldn't even put the first Gulf War in there because Saddam Hussein was not much for strategy. And that was a pretty easy war, really. But maybe Korea, World War II, certainly. Maybe we had those kinds of campaigns in those wars. We haven't had one of those in a long, 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 long time. And oh, by the way, we haven't won a war in a long, long time. And this is not going to be an exception. So this is all weighing on Trump. It's weighing on him. And word is getting through from people who have a little more circumspection, a little more prudence, a little more concern with regard to the country, that this might not be a cakewalk. Indeed, it might not even be close to a cakewalk.
Larry, I think if they decide to attack, it would be, an attack that they would plan that the initial moment of attack would be somehow surprising for Iranians. I don't know if that's possible with the level of information that Iran has, with the level of, that the Iranian army is prepared right now. And they have everything. They have Russia and China even informing them if something is happening. That would make it hugely difficult to surprise Iran with an attack.
You're not going to achieve strategic surprise. Absolutely, you're not. You're not going to achieve operational surprise. You're not. You might achieve a degree of tactical surprise because you can pick your hour, time, darkness, date, all the things that go along with that. But the tactical surprise would be only momentary. And if I were Iran, I don't think they'll do this. Maybe you could help me here. I don't think they'll do this, but if I were Iran, the moment I even smell gunpowder in the air, I would destroy Israel. That would be my first, other than defending myself from what might be coming in from the empire, my first offensive action would be to destroy Bibi Netanyahu's Israel. Just destroy it. And I don't think we could stop that. I really don't. That would be, to me, the supreme act of strategic genius on the part of Iran. to ignore everything else other than holding up a hand, like, defend that, to go after with everything they have offensively, not Doha, not Ras Tanura in Saudi Arabia, not the Strait, go after Israel. Maximize everything you can put on Israel and destroy it.